She was just another passenger, tucked into her window seat in row 12, drifting in and out of sleep as the hum of the plane filled the cabin. The flight had been ordinary to ordinary, she thought, with nothing out of the routine to grab her attention. Families chatted, flight attendants moved up and down the aisles with practiced smiles, and the world outside her window seemed calm and endless. But in a matter of moments, everything would change. A sudden voice over the intercom shattered the quiet. "Is there a pilot on board?" The words echoed, sharp and urgent, sending a wave of confusion and tension through every passenger. Hearts skipped, phones were raised. Eyes scanned the aisles, searching for someone, anyone, who could answer. The captain's tone was serious to serious, and the cabin shifted from sleepy, calm to nervous energy in an instant. In that moment, she felt her own pulse quicken. Who would step forward? What was happening up in the cockpit that made the captain call out like that? She had no idea that her life, and the lives of everyone on this flight, were about to hinge on skills no one expected her to have. Passengers whispered in fear and disbelief. Yet there she was, still in her seat, her hand brushing against her bag, unaware that fate had quietly chosen her for something extraordinary. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, and every eye in the cabin was now on row 12, waiting for the answer that could change everything. She had always loved flying, but not from the cockpit, just from the passenger seat. Watching clouds drift like cotton across the sky, row 12 had been her little bubble, a place where she could escape from the chaos of her life on the ground. Yet, as she blinked awake, the calm she had clung to seemed like a distant memory. Around her, passengers fidgeted, gripping armrests and clutching bags as whispers rippled like electricity through the cabin. Something serious was happening, something no one expected. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the sudden urgency. The captain's voice was steady but urgent, a combination that told everyone this was no routine call for help. She glanced around at the faces, some pale, some tense, some frozen in disbelief. Families held children tightly, elderly passengers muttered prayers under their breath, and flight attendants exchanged quick, worried glances. It was a snapshot of fear, captured in real time. And then she remembered, long ago, before life had gotten complicated, she had trained briefly in aviation, just enough to know the basics. It had been a hobby, a dream she'd shelved for work, bills, and the daily grind. No one around her could know, no one had ever guessed. But now, that knowledge, buried under years of ordinary life, pulsed through her like a warning and a promise all at once. The intercom crackled again. The captain's words sharper this time. "We need a pilot immediately. Please, anyone trained, step forward." Eyes turned, one by one, scanning the cabin. And all of a sudden, row 12 wasn't just a seat, it was the center of a question no one was ready to answer. Her fingers tightened around the armrest as the reality of the situation sank in. Around her, the cabin had grown quieter, almost eerily so, as if every passenger sensed the invisible thread of danger connecting them all. The murmurs had stopped, replaced by the steady hum of the engines and the occasional sharp exchange over the intercom. Some passengers exchanged anxious glances, while others pressed their foreheads against the windows, willing the sky to stay calm. A flight attendant moved down the aisle, her voice low but urgent, asking if anyone had any flying experience. Several hands went up nervously, but none of the volunteers sounded confident, and the tension only thickened. She realized that if no one acted, panic could spread. Her mind raced not just through the mechanics she remembered from her training, but through the possibility of guiding hundreds of lives safely through whatever was unfolding in the cockpit. Behind her, a family whispered fears of turbulence, while a young man nervously filmed the scene on his phone, his shaky hands betraying his curiosity and fear. A little further up, an elderly woman clutched a rosary, muttering prayers under her breath, eyes darting to the cockpit with hope and dread mingled. Each corner of the cabin had its own story, its own layer of tension, yet all threads pointed toward the same unknown crisis. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she weighed her options. Stepping forward could change everything or end in disaster. The captain's voice cut through the growing anxiety once more. "This is not a drill. Anyone with pilot experience, now." Passengers turned toward row 12, the weight of expectation and fear settling squarely on her shoulders. Her palms were sweaty, and her mind raced faster than the plane itself. Every second stretched, each one heavier than the last, as passengers stared at her with a mixture of hope and fear. The murmurs had faded completely. Even the flight attendants seemed frozen, their usual calm replaced by a tension she could almost taste. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, louder than the engine. As the weight of the captain's urgent call pressed down on her, she glanced toward the cockpit door, locked tight, the source of the unknown danger looming just beyond. Her memory flickered back to her flight training, the procedures, the checklists, the maneuvers she had practiced only in simulations. Could she really handle this? Could she guide a plane full of passengers through a crisis she didn't fully understand yet? Every instinct screamed both yes and no at the same time. From behind, a young boy whispered to his mother, "Mom, is she going to fly the plane?" The woman's grip tightened around his arm, her eyes brimming with silent prayer. The tension was suffocating, thickening with each passing second. Somewhere over the clouds, the world outside remained calm, indifferent to the storm inside the cabin. Then, the captain's voice came again, sharper than before, almost strained. "We need immediate action. Any trained pilot." Now, the intercom cut off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence that seemed to echo through every seat. All eyes were on row 12. The plane felt smaller, as if the entire cabin had contracted into a single heartbeat of suspense. Waiting for her to make a choice that could change everything, she took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart, when suddenly the plane jolted violently. The overhead compartments rattled, and a sharp alarm blared from the cockpit. Gasps and cries filled the cabin as the plane dipped slightly, throwing some passengers against their seatbelts. The calm she had hoped for moments ago was gone, replaced by raw panic. Something more than a simple pilot shortage was unfolding, something no one could have predicted. A flight attendant rushed past her, whispering urgently, "The co-pilot isn't responding. Something's wrong up there." Her stomach twisted. She had assumed the captain's call was due to an emergency routine or a minor malfunction. But now it was clear that the situation was far more serious. The stakes had risen in an instant, and the quiet tension of the last few minutes had exploded into full-blown fear. Passengers clutched their seats, and phones were raised to capture the moment. Though most hands shook too much to film anything steady, the little boy behind her whimpered, and an elderly man muttered, "God help us." Every face told the same story: uncertainty, dread, and a desperate hope that someone could take control. Her mind raced faster than ever, remembering every detail of her past flight training, every instruction about what to do in a cockpit emergency. And just as she began to stand, ready to step forward, the plane shuddered again, more violently this time, and the intercom crackled with a distorted voice. "Systems failing. Altitude dropping." The words were broken, but the message was clear. The moment of decision had arrived, and whatever choice she made now could determine the fate of everyone on board. Her legs moved before her mind fully caught up. She rose from row 12, hands trembling but determined, and made her way toward the cockpit. Every eye in the cabin followed her, a mixture of hope and fear anchoring her in place. The shuddering of the plane intensified with every step, each bump sending a jolt through her chest. She reached the cockpit door and hesitated, just a fraction of a second before knocking and pushing it open. Inside, the scene was chaos. The co-pilot slumped over the controls, unconscious, while warning alarms flashed across every panel. The captain, pale and strained, looked at her with a mix of relief and disbelief. "I need you," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. She nodded, sliding into the seat beside him and immediately scanning the instruments, recalling every lesson she had ever learned. The next few minutes were a blur of calculation, coordination, and sheer adrenaline. She followed the emergency procedures, her hands moving with practiced precision, guiding the plane through turbulent air, steadying it against the rapid descent. Passengers clung to their seats, eyes wide, unaware of the exact danger, yet sensing the courage in the cockpit. Finally, with a controlled descent, the plane leveled out. Relief swept through the cabin, whispers of gratitude mingling with shaky laughter and tears, just as she allowed herself to breathe. The intercom crackled again. A calm, unfamiliar voice came through. "Flight 438, this is air traffic control. We just lost contact with your transponder, and your primary radar signal is showing unusual interference." The cabin fell silent. She exchanged a tense glance with the captain, realizing that even though one crisis was over, something even stranger and potentially more dangerous was waiting just beyond the cloud.